Hey folks, told this story recently and someone suggested I post it up somewhere. And I've got a completely unused Reddit account just sitting here. So here we are. Before I start, I should preface this by saying it's not my own story, but something my deceased grandmother told me several times. I'll provide as many details as I can, but the two people involved in the story are deceased, and I can only confirm so much. I was born in Doylestown, Ohio, which is a tiny village located in northeastern Ohio. Aside from being a popular destination for retirees, because it's in the middle of nowhere, it's in a place full of old, abandoned, and collapsed coal mines, and has some fascinating history. Look up William Doyle in Rogues Hollow if you want to get into it a little more. But there's plenty in this area that's spooky, and a lot of old-timers around the village like to make it sound extremely haunted. My grandmother lived there almost her entire life, ever since she left the Air Force where she served as a nurse and met my grandfather, who died several years later. She raised my mother and uncle, then helped raise my sister and I, and the entire time she worked as the bar manager at the American Legion in town. This story takes place about 8-ish years ago in this building. My grandmother was in charge of closing the bar out that night, and she was with the finance officer for that particular American Legion post. We'll call him Brian. He made sure the kitchen was closed down, while my grandmother was in the office finishing up paperwork before they locked up for the night. There were no patrons around. All the doors were locked outside, and the entire building is windowless. No way anyone could sneak in or sneak out, except for 3 outside doors, all secured. While she's finishing up her work, my grandmother hears what sounds like a door opening across the bar, and when she looks up, she can see the men's bathroom door slowly opening, like someone is stepping out, which isn't necessarily impossible. A patron could have been inside being sick, or passed out from too much to drink. But my grandmother can't see them. All she can see is what looks like a black, blurry figure lean out from behind the door. And when she calls out, "We're closed, you need to leave," this figure seems to lean out a little more, and then jump back into the bathroom, slamming the door behind it so hard she swore the floor shook. The bathroom is a considerable distance away from the office, almost on the opposite side of the building from her, and she knows it isn't Brian because she can hear him in the kitchen. When the door slams, he comes out to see what's going on, and they look at each other and basically say, "What the fuck was that?" So my grandmother and Brian decide to check out what's going on, and she volunteers him to go, because it's the men's bathroom. He grabs a flashlight from behind the bar and has a sidearm. He goes over to the bathroom. My grandma sees him open the door, turn on the light and step inside, and the door closes behind him. She waits for 15 minutes and decides he isn't coming out. My grandmother, for reference, was not a helpless little old lady. She'd been a bartender for 30 years at this point and handled all kinds of drunks and rowdy patrons. She was certified to carry a pistol, even though she rarely did, and usually outshot most of the veterans who took target practice with her. So she gets the other flashlight from behind the bar and gets her own pistol out of the office where it was kept in a drawer, then goes to the bathroom to see what's going on. She steps inside, and the light, which was on when Brian entered, is now off. The 5 faucets against the mirror are all on and spitting out water, despite the fact that they are sensor-triggered faucets and should have needed hands under them to activate, and all the stalls are closed. She goes inside. She told me she felt like it was 20 degrees colder than inside the bar, but it's also humid, a sticky, clinging kind of cold that made her extremely uncomfortable right away. She doesn't see Brian, so she goes to check the stalls. The first few aren't locked, and nothing was inside, but one of them is locked. She does a quick check under, and she can see feet, so she ducks up under the stall and finds Brian. He's sitting on the toilet, flashlight and gun on his lap. He's staring at the stall door. He's pale as a sheet and cold to the touch. He's completely unresponsive, and his eyes are glazed over. When she touches him, he makes this whimpering groan sound. She unlocks the stall door and grabs him as best she can, then hauls him out on his back in the bathroom so she can start checking his pulse and performing CPR if she needs to. He's got a pulse, but he's unresponsive, so she steps out of the bathroom to call an ambulance. She's on the phone, explaining what's going on, and the bathroom door is slowly closing behind her because it's a weighted door. Without warning, this door slams shut behind her. She got so startled she dropped the phone. She tries to go back into the bathroom, and it's locked from the inside. She can't get in, so she goes toward the office to get the key. She comes back with the key and is about halfway down the bar when the bathroom door slowly opens, and Brian comes out in a daze. He makes his way over to the bar and sits down on one of the stools. He's completely unresponsive and doesn't seem to register her presence, so she goes to check the bathroom. She told me she checked every inch of the bathroom. She even checked above the drop ceiling, but there was nothing. According to what Brian told her, he remembered going inside and turning on the lights, but the next thing he knew, he was waking up in the middle of the floor, feeling like he was coming down off something, and very sick. The ambulance comes, and Brian is taken to the hospital, while my grandmother calls my uncle and the officer in charge of maintenance for the building, and they do a full check of the property before locking up. They check the cameras the next day, and Grandma watches the entire event play out as she remembers, except that when she sees the door swing open on the cameras, there's no one behind it. Door swings open, no person. Door slams shut. Brian goes in. Brian doesn't come out. She goes in. She comes out. Door slams. Brian staggers out. All there. All documented. Meanwhile, Brian calls her and explains that the doctors checked him out. They found him almost completely healthy. No sign of anything to explain his disorientation. The only thing they found was that when he was initially put into the ambulance, his body temperature was only a few degrees from hypothermia, and they couldn't figure out why. Grandma and Brian don't close together for a while, understandably, and she doesn't experience anything else as her and the facilities officer now tag team the closing. It's almost exactly a week later when Brian returns, and no one wants to talk about what happened, so they don't. They go about business as usual, up until the final door check. The bar has doors that separate it from the dining hall next door, where Sunday breakfast and special functions are held. Grandma is checking those doors while Brian is standing at the bar waiting for her. Grandma checks the locks, then turns and freezes. Right behind Brian is a black humanoid-looking figure that is standing so close. She had no idea it wasn't Brian's shadow until she watched it slowly tilt its head out from behind his. She tried to pull up her flashlight, but Brian jumped about 5 feet forward and turned around before she could, and the thing was gone. According to Brian, he jumped because he felt something on his shoulder and heard a whisper in his ear say,
"Are you still cold?"
That's the story as best as I can remember from my grandmother. But again, it's been about 8 years, and I didn't experience this firsthand. I've never known my grandmother to be uncomfortable about anything, but I know she was uncomfortable telling me this story, and only did it multiple times because I kept asking her for more details. An additional side note is that my grandmother never experienced anything on the nights Brian didn't close with her, and when the second incident happened, he refused to close ever again, and nothing happened after that. Brian was a very healthy, active veteran, with no history of seizures or any sorts of health problems that would explain what happened to him. He would also die later that year from complications due to an ingrown hair, which shook my grandmother very badly, considering the two were close. My grandmother died after I moved to Washington from Ohio, and it's only really recently that I've felt comfortable talking about this story, considering it wasn't mine, and I never really got a chance to say goodbye to her before she died. but I was encouraged to post this story for safekeeping. I'm definitely a believer in ghosts, spirits, and more. But when she told me this story, it was the first time it all felt real to me. Because my grandmother was the most grounded human being I know, and I never doubted for a second she experienced any of this. Anyway, thanks for reading this. And of course, if you have any theories or need more information, feel free to ask. I grew up in a small, strict religious town, almost cult-like in some senses. When I moved out, it was a major culture shock, coming from a town of 60 to a town of over 125,000. I ran into some well-odd folks, but who hasn't, right? Anyway, I had to move in with my aunt because I had no money for a place of my own. I got a job working overnights. Well, one day I wake up around 5 p.m. I walk out to have a smoke before I started getting ready. I start playing music on my phone, minding my own business. I realize that there is this old white car running in the lot close by me. So trying to be polite, I look and see if it's anyone I know. And just a complete stranger. So I walk back inside and the car drives away. A little while later, I look out the window. The car is back in the same place. I thought maybe they were waiting for a friend or family member. But as the hours went by, the pattern kept repeating. Eventually, I had to leave for work. I walk outside. No car, so it put my mind at ease. I pull out and start heading to work. I get to the road and I look in my mirror, and the car is right behind me. But I guess you never know. Being followed after one turn isn't anything to worry about, right? Well, after about 10 turns and 11 miles, I'm concerned. They're still on my ass and they aren't going anywhere. I know I should have called the police, but that wasn't something I ever did before. It wasn't something that was ever needed where I grew up. So I was just about to turn down the road to work, and I realized if these people are up to no good, pulling up at work is the last thing I should do. I work with vulnerable individuals who don't know any better. I see a fast food restaurant ahead of me, and I think they won't follow me into the drive-thru. With no one else in line, I pull up to order. No one's behind me. I'm very relieved. Next thing I know, a guy steps in between me and the intercom. And yeah, it's the car guy. He starts yelling at me to show him who I am. Not knowing any better, I flashed my ID. Thank God he considered that acceptable. But he bends down and stares at me. And then he says,
You know, I can taste the color red.
then goes back to his car and drives off. I've literally never been so terrified of a person, ever. Okay, so I'm going for a night out to have dinner with my fiancé at a restaurant in a big mall close to home in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. We're in the car, chatting and making our way there. There's a parking structure at this mall, and to get there you have to pass by the main street entrance on a thin one-lane path. I have a habit of always being quite vigilant, looking around and noticing everything I can. I mean, those who come to Rio de Janeiro or live here know that this isn't the safest city in the world. So as I slowly drive by the main entrance's big double-glass automatic doors, I look at everyone standing there. Typically they're waiting for an Uber or taxi to pick them up. In the corner of the square space, almost touching the left wall just outside the door, I see a woman, or what looked like a female human. But what made me look twice and then a third time was that she had no face. She looked like one of those store mannequins. Now, you could argue that she was a mannequin, except that lady was moving around. That blew my mind. About 5 seconds after we passed by those doors, my fiance looks at me shocked and asks if I had just seen that lady without a face. I mean, it's one thing for me to have supposedly seen it alone, and maybe I was just seeing things, as they say, but she had seen it too. We got in and parked the car, and we went outside to see this thing, but she was gone. To this day, every time we go to that mall, we look for the faceless woman, but we've never seen her again. I guess it wasn't too creepy, but definitely some glitch in the Matrix type stuff. I've had various experiences through my life that I can't logically explain, but today I'm going to tell you about an experience that I didn't realize was one until after it had happened. It was early autumn in 1999, and I was camping with friends in the West Country, UK. There were about 6 of us. We had set up our tents alongside a little stream, but decided that we would walk the mile or so back to the local village and have dinner at the local pub. It was a beautiful evening, roughly 6 p.m. Still bright daylight and still warm, mid-20s centigrade. We were walking down the country lane with hedgerows and pastures beyond them on either side of us. I was walking with my friend Dave, chatting about whatever. We are at the head of the group with the rest a few meters behind us. Dave is on my left, and as we are walking and talking, we come to a metal gate, also on the left, leading into the field. There's this farmer leaning against the gate with a smile on his face. He looks friendly, and to be honest, harmless, maybe in his 50s or early 60s. But what struck me most was what he was wearing. He had on rough cotton or maybe woolen dark brown trousers, an old-style white cotton shirt, and an old scruffy black waistcoat. He sees me staring, and as we draw abreast, says,
Evening.
"Hi," I reply. Dave looks at me, and then looks to our left. In the meantime, the farmer has said something about the weather, and I reply that it's perfect for camping. We don't stop walking, or slow our already slow pace, and once a few meters away, I turn to Dave and say, "Did you see what he was wearing? Like it was the 1940s or something." Dave turned to me with a confused look on his face. Who? Who were you just talking to?" I turned to gesture to the farmer, but he's not there. Nobody else but me had seen him, not even the rest of the group behind us. I have a police scanner, and I listen to it at night before bed. Before I turned it off one night, I heard the address of the guy across the street from me. So I walked down the stairs and opened the door like some idiot. I could see that the house was getting robbed. He must have called the cops before they got in, or a neighbor did. There was like 4 or 5 of them, and I had the door halfway open with the porch light on. They were in a panic since we lived kinda close to the police station. That was dumb on their part. One of them saw me and told one of his buddies, and they ran out of the house toward me. I still remember that sound of a loud bang and a bullet missing my head by not a lot. I have nightmares of it hitting me. I quickly slammed the door. I have one of those number locks, and they tried to shoot it off, but it didn't really work out. By the time they gave up trying to get me, I could hear police sirens, and then I heard tires squealing. The guy they were robbing was sadly killed. Since they were planning to get rid of him, they didn't wear masks. I identified the 2 that tried to get me, and they ratted out their buddies. So in the end, I was able to bring his killers to justice, and I'm happy about that. And may the man they killed rest in peace. One night when I was little, probably around 7 or 8 years old. I was playing hide and seek at night, around 8 p.m. in the fall, because it was basically pitch black at that time. It was my cousin, my friend, and I. We all lived in one apartment complex. However, we were playing at the apartment next to us. Anyway, it was my turn to find them, so I sat down and counted to 20. After I finished, I started walking around the apartment, and as I turned the corner, one of the windows of the first level apartments caught my eye. I stared at it, bent over with my hands on my knees. Then the curtains opened. You could see into the apartment. There was a body lying on the kitchen table, cut open. The person or thing who opened the curtain and everyone around the table were wearing what looked like nurse outfits, with masks over their face and some lens things. It looked like they were performing surgery on the person laying on the table. The one who opened the curtain pulled his mask up and showed me his sharp teeth. I just froze. I didn't know what to do. Once I was able to move, I started crying and ran off, trying to find my cousin and friend. I was literally bawling my eyes out. When we passed the window on our way home, the curtains were closed. Since then, I've always been curious as to what the hell I witnessed. The body on the table looked so real and was lifeless. I still think about this to this day. I talk with my cousin about it, and he still says he's never seen me so scared. Hey guys and ladies, thanks for watching. Links to all my shit are down in the description. Be good to animals, even people. Sip.
Scout, Snema, Barksbus, Herish.